Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or indeed good evening, depending on your time zone and depending on when you are watching this. It is Tuesday, the 19th of May, 2020. Normally the 139th day of the year, but this year the 140th, what with it being a leap year. Happy Tuesday, I'm James Innes, and this is my daily YouTube show, The Jobs Guru. Please do think about subscribing. In today's show, I'm going to be taking a look at the latest jobs, career and employment news, which to say the least is not good, I'm afraid. I will as always be covering a question from one of my viewers. I'll be tackling the topic of NHS staff from overseas having their residency permits extended for a year. But what happens to them after that year? Do we send them home again? And we'll be examining a tough and nasty interview question, looking at what character flaws or personality defects you might have. If you have any questions or comments as you watch them, please do let me have them below. And if you like what you see, then please do hit that YouTube thumbs up. Now first, as usual, I have had a good read of all the main news headlines, and in particular the workplace, jobs, employment and careers related headlines. And I haven't had to go very far today, to be honest. The top headline on BBC News reads, "Coronavirus, young people most likely to lose work in lockdown." And the top headline in The Guardian's work and careers section says, "Young workers most likely to have lost jobs during COVID-19 crisis." Around a quarter of 18 to 24-year-olds have been furloughed, and nearly 1 in 10% have lost their jobs altogether, the highest figure out of all age groups. You add that up, and it's more than a third who have been furloughed or fired. The Guardian, in fact, has a host of other articles along the same very depressing lines, really. We've got firms slash entry-level jobs by almost a quarter owing to coronavirus. Another one reads, despite UK furlough scheme, 6 million, a lot of people, 6 million fear losing their job. And also, Britain is at risk of returning to 1980s levels of unemployment. The UK must reabsorb those out of work due to COVID, says the Bank of England's chief economist. I also spotted a headline on Sky. Coronavirus, jobless claims surge by record 856,500 in April, to the highest level since 1996. These headlines speak for themselves, really. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. The government must seize the initiative on the employment front right now and dedicate the necessary time and effort to setting up proper support for the rapidly rising ranks of the unemployed, especially the young. They are facing an unprecedented situation and need all the help they can get as they try desperately to embark on their careers. On a slightly more positive note, I'd like to conclude this segment with a most interesting piece, I thought, from the Daily Mash. The headline reads, "Couple forced to work from home realise neither actually does any work." The case study reports on Tom and Claire Logan. The Logans, who usually spend their evenings regaling each other with how swamped they are at work, have seen the truth about their jobs revealed by sitting in the same room for 9 hours of pure procrastination. So, on to that question now from one of my viewers. I did actually make reference to this particular question in last Friday's episode. There was a piece in the FT by Adrian Klaas. The headline read, "Lessons for graduates entering a job market in crisis." Adrian said the reality facing this year's leavers is likely to be even harsher than the one that she faced back in 2009. Well, as we can see from today's headline news, she's not wrong. So today's question from Emily in Manchester. "Back in February, I was offered a position on the graduate management programme with a major recruitment agency chain. This offer has just been withdrawn, apparently due to the impact of the coronavirus situation on the business and the recruitment sector as a whole. Whilst I do completely understand the reasons, it obviously leaves me in a difficult position. Can they actually do this legally? What are my rights here?" Well, yeah, Emily, in theory, the company may well be in breach of contract here, but the issue is really whether or not this is something you're going to be able to pursue during these unprecedented times. I wish I had better news for you, but it's really up to you to decide whether any action can realistically be taken. It may be, when this whole situation ends, which it will, you will still want to work for this company, and any legal action right now could very likely scupper that. So maybe finding an amicable solution might be best. Contact them directly, perhaps, rather than embarking straight along the legal path. I've heard from friends in the recruitment sector. Sales have indeed absolutely plummeted. Despite government measures, there have been thousands of redundancies within that sector. And I've even heard it said that pretty much all graduate offers to start in September have been retracted. I haven't seen many people reporting on this, though. The focus in the media has been obviously on the hospitality sector and also aviation. But it's absolutely horrific what's happening in this particular sector. As one recruitment professional put it to me, I haven't actually heard of more redundancies in any other sector. Now, if you approach this diplomatically, Emily, it may be that the company opts instead to give you notice of termination instead of withdrawing the offer, or maybe they can just be persuaded to put the offer on hold. So go about it gently, is my advice. I'm always open to new and interesting questions from my viewers, so if you have a jobs, careers, or employment-related question for me, then do please type it into the comment section below, and I may well feature it in a future episode of this show. And as regular viewers will know, if I do, there will be a Jobs Guru coffee mug winging its way to you in the post. The first batch is due to arrive tomorrow, and I can't wait to be able to show you a real one. But, of course, deliveries at the moment, a bit unreliable. We'll see tomorrow. Watch this space. Now then, each day, as well as answering one viewer's specific question, I also look into a specific issue raised by a number of different viewers. Today, I'm shining my spotlight on volunteering. Might come as a surprise to you, but I've received quite a few questions along these lines. If you find yourself suddenly out of work at this difficult time, which a lot of people have, then volunteering can be a really useful option to consider. So many advantages. First and foremost, it'll demonstrate to a future recruiter or prospective employer that you have recent work experience, that you've got a strong work ethic, and evidently a desire to progress. And it makes for a stronger and much more interesting CV, of course, especially for the young, recent school, college, or university leavers, for example, in particular. But also, rather importantly, it can do wonders to boost your own self-confidence, rather than sitting around not working. Don't underestimate how valuable that can be in so many ways, including when you get into an interview room. Volunteers are almost always welcomed with open arms, and you may well find, in fact, in due course, it facilitates your transition into a paid role with that same organisation, quite possibly. So, on to the main topic that I wish to discuss with you today. I mentioned it earlier. NHS staff from overseas have had their resident permits extended for a year. But what happens to them after that 1 year? Do we send them home again? So, the NHS, just in case you didn't know, it's the UK's publicly funded healthcare system. Officially launched in 1948, and the overarching aim of providing healthcare to everyone, irrespective of their ability to pay for it. Groundbreaking at the time, and it continues to provide invaluable healthcare services to the people who need it most. Despite the problems that the NHS has faced over the years, due in part to funding cuts by successive governments, public support for our beloved healthcare system has always been resolute. During the recent pandemic, this support has grown exponentially. People around the world will be talking about Captain Tom Moore for many years to come. The centenarian, he aimed to raise £1,000 for the NHS by walking up and down his garden 100 times in the lead up to his 100th birthday, of course, and ended up raising tens of millions. I think last count it was heading rapidly towards 40 million, might even have passed that now. And every Thursday evening at 8 p.m, there's the Clap for Our Carers movement, which sees people of all ages out on their doorsteps, applauding, banging pots and pans, generally making as much noise as possible to thank carers within their local communities. I love it. Children are encouraged to paint pictures of rainbows for proud display in windows or on gate posts, etc. And let's not forget the 5 post boxes painted blue by the Royal Mail as a tribute to the NHS. There have also been a number of positive steps taken to recognise the contributions made by the 153,000 NHS workers who are not British nationals. That's a lot of people, isn't it? Roughly 12% of the 1.2 million employed by the NHS, according to the House of Commons statistics. Now, restrictions on the amount of hours student nurses and doctors can work in the NHS were removed, and pre-registered overseas nurses who had been called upon to help with the increased patient numbers were given more time to pass their exams. When it was also announced that NHS staff from overseas would have their work visas extended for a year free of charge, this also seemed to be pretty positive news. However, if you explore this a bit further, you start to see just how difficult it has been for NHS staff who are not British nationals, and actually for many years too. The announcement, in case you missed it, came right at the end of March, and questions were already being raised the very next day. A piece in The Independent, for example, headlined with, "The government just admitted it needs foreign NHS workers. This visa extension shows it doesn't value them at all." When the visa extension was announced, it was also confirmed that this would include exemption from the immigration health surcharge. This surcharge of up to £400 per year is payable by anyone applying for a visa in the UK, including NHS staff, and applies to their spouses and children named on that residency permit. There is no right of deferral, and it cannot be paid annually, meaning it has to be paid in advance for the entire duration of the visa or residency permit. Breaking this down, using an example from an article in The Guardian, a family of 4 on a 5-year work permit has to pay £8,000 in advance, otherwise their visa application can be rejected. This surcharge does apply to anyone, but effectively NHS staff from overseas are being taxed twice to use the NHS that they have come here to work for. Considering that many NHS staff have been working extra shifts without pay to help out during the unprecedented COVID-19 outbreak, no doubt many of that 12% who are not British nationals, it's hardly surprising there have been calls to make permanent changes. Suggestions include abolishing the NHS surcharge, as well as providing overseas NHS workers with permanent right to remain, assuming all other eligibility criteria are met, of course. Looking at the bigger picture, people are also petitioning for all NHS employees to get a pay increase, something that would include those from those overseas workers too. The steps have been taken so far to recognise and reward NHS employees, including those who are not British nationals, have definitely been encouraging, yes, but it remains to be seen whether there will be any long-term legislative changes. But if public regard for the NHS and the people who work tirelessly to ensure that it continues to provide the best possible standards of care is anything to go by, the NHS is going to be making the news headlines for many months to come. Naturally, as always, I would really welcome any thoughts, questions, ideas, comments that you may have in connection with this in the comments section down below. So, as you may or may not know, I've written a few books. In fact, I'm the UK's best-selling careers author, and amongst my titles is the Interview Question and Answer book. As they say, it is available in all good bookshops. In each episode of this YouTube show, I take questions from that book and I look at how to answer them. And all this week, I'm taking my questions from the chapter entitled The Top 25 Questions, Taking the Heat. So here is today's. What character flaws do you have? Similar questions include, do you have any personality defects? So back to the question in hand. This is an aggressively phrased and potentially very leading question. The interviewer is trying to force you to expose a major weakness. It's not too dissimilar to, they're questioning you about your weaknesses, except it's a much broader question and a much more personal question, a much more pointy, spiky, nasty question. Whilst they'll obviously be interested in any personality defects you actually do have, their main purpose in asking this question is to put you in a difficult situation and see how you handle it. So, how to answer? It would most likely be a fatal error to respond directly to this question and start talking about something which is inherently going to be very negative. So, whilst declaring you have no weaknesses would be excessive, yet it is perfectly reasonable to state that you don't feel you have any character flaws as such. I would suggest you try to sidestep the question a little bit. Try to talk about maybe a minor weakness or flaw. And as always when discussing potentially negative points, make sure you put some positive spin on it where you possibly can. Try to turn any negative into a positive. The best way to illustrate this, I've got a little example here from you, taken straight from my book. Everybody's character is different, of course. I don't believe I have any major character flaws. I suppose I can on occasion perhaps be overly demanding, maybe both of myself and members of my team. I can be very critical of perhaps of my own work, and I expect those under me to work to the same standards. But I'm nevertheless patient. I'm a patient individual, and I'm prepared to give members of my staff a reasonable chance. Everyone makes mistakes. We're all human. The important thing, though, is never to make the same mistake twice. So, answering the question, but carefully sidestepping it and remaining on a positive note as well. So now that is pretty much all for today. Just two more things. First, the usual but important YouTube request. If you have any questions, comments about this episode, this show in general, indeed about life, the universe, the cinematic works of the Coen brothers, whatever, do please let me have them in the comment section below. If you like this episode, do please hit it with the YouTube thumbs up, and do think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and if you have, please do ring that bell so you can receive notifications when I upload new episodes. Finally, let me tell you what's happening tomorrow. Tomorrow's show, Wednesday, I'll be chatting about a variety of things, including how the hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their jobs due to this coronavirus crisis should reflect this in their CV. And next in the interview question series, we'll be looking at how you handle being criticised. I do hope you'll tune in. Thank you for watching today. Keep safe and be well, my friends. Goodbye.